Hello and welcome to another ranking video. This time ranking the Legend of Zelda games. They were in order when I hit presentation mode and now they're not. So I guess we're ranking them in this weird order it's put them in. This list was made by Major Shy Guy, and the only game it doesn't have on here that is worth any real notice is the Link's Awakening remake, I assume because it was made beforehand. But the remake of Link's Awakening and Link's Awakening itself, as you will see, both rank about the same for me. I think the remake does add some cool stuff, but it doesn't change where the game already would have ranked on my list. So we're going to go ahead and use this one anyway. We'll start with the original Legend of Zelda. How do we rank Zelda games, right? Like, that is a very serious question. I think that a perfect Zelda game would be a triple S Zelda game, you might say, would be a Zelda game that has really, really solid dungeons, that has a decent story at least. A perfect one would have a great story as well. A really solid soundtrack with great combat, great items, and puzzles. Really cool puzzles. I think all those together make a really good Zelda game. So where, with all of that in mind, does the original Zelda rank? I think that the original Legend of Zelda has some really good music. I think it has some really good puzzles, and it has some decent dungeons. Not much of a story. My biggest issue with it is that it's extremely difficult and that it's very easy to get lost. There's a lot of secrets that aren't really conveyed to the player in any way. And although some of the later Zelda games have that same problem, I do think for the most part they do a very good job of letting you know there's a secret there via world hints, things that show you that in the world or things of that nature. A big one is cracks on the walls that tell you can bomb there. First Zelda doesn't really have that. So I think it is still a really solid game. I do still like it a lot. We're going to put it at a B, the original Zelda. I know there are some people that say, well, you have to rank it high because it was the first, and the other games wouldn't exist if not for that. I think that undermines a tier list quite a bit, so we're not going to do that. Wind Waker is the next one in our random order that it has given us. And Wind Waker is a really solid Zelda game. It has some really good dungeons. It has some really good boss fights. It has some cool equipment and cool items. The world itself is really cool. The Great Sea and all the different islands on it. Some really solid puzzles in there. I like the story. Wind Waker would probably be... I know it'd be in my top 10 Zelda games. I think it might be in my top 5. I guess we'll find out after this. For now, we're going to tentatively put Wind Waker in an S. Wind Waker HD, the Wii U remake, remaster, I guess, added some cool new quality of life features that make it a lot more fun too, where you're not having to hunt down the Triforce shards everywhere. But for the most part, I think Wind Waker's really good, and it may move up to a triple S. We'll see. I like it a lot. It's one of my favorites. Hyrule Warriors was on this list, and I do actually really like Hyrule Warriors. I think it's a decent game. It's a fun Musou game. I don't know that it's like the best Zelda game. Any more than I would say like Cadence of Hyrule is the best Zelda game. Although I think Cadence of Hyrule might be a better Zelda game than Hyrule Warriors in a lot of ways. Hyrule Warriors does definitely have secrets, and it does have a pretty good story, and it has some really solid music. It doesn't really have dungeons at all. So I think we're going to probably put it in a D when it comes to Zelda games. I do really like playing it, though. Absolutely. Four Swords Adventures. This is going to be a controversial opinion. I don't really like Four Swords that much. I think the idea is really cool. I don't really like the way that it works in-game. Switching out items through a menu can already be kind of cumbersome, but having to physically go to like podiums, basically, and take items and switch them in between characters, and it can get really annoying. I do think it has some really cool puzzles and some really fun bosses, though, and some really interesting dungeons. I think we're probably going to put it in a B as well. I think it's fine for the most part. I don't really like playing it, but it's not bad at all. This is not really fair because A Link to the Past with the Four Swords does have some quality of life over the original. I'm going to tell you right now, it's a long way back there. A Link to the Past is my favorite Zelda game, so this is still going triple S for me. Yes, story-wise, it is a little bit lacking. I do think it gives you everything you need for the story, but it has some of the best dungeons in the entire franchise. It has some of the best puzzles in the entire franchise. It has a really, really good series of equipment. It has a really, really solid soundtrack. I love the boss fights. Link to the Past, top tier game. Minish Cap is also really good. Minish Cap, I think if it was not on GBA, I might have probably played it more. because by the time it came out, I was playing my GBA a lot less, but because I was having work and a job. But Minish Cap is really solid. I think that everything to do with shrinking and going into places and the actual Minish themselves and the different cool dungeons that come from there. I actually think some of the Minish Cap dungeons are my favorite in the series. But it's really, really good. I love it. I also really love Majora's Mask. The only reason it's not a triple S for me is because I'm one of those people that's not a huge fan of the time mechanic. I know it's easily manipulatable and you can get around it very easily. I just am not a huge fan of it myself. I don't think taking it away from the game would help, because I think if you took it away from the game, it would rob the game of a lot of its identity. I think it really needs that 3-day mechanic to sell how terrible everything is and how little time Link has to fix everything. But besides all that, I think it's a very good Zelda game. It has some really interesting bosses. The dungeons are really cool. I especially love, I can't remember the name of it, but the swamp dungeon, the forest dungeon, as it were. That one's a lot of fun. And I think everything to do with the characters in Majora's Mask is maybe my favorite in all of Zelda. The characters in Majora's Mask. They're really, really good. Mikau, and Keaton, and everything going on there. But with that said, Keaton's not his name. What is his name? Anju and... I gotta look it up. Cafe, that's his name, not Keaton. Come on, come on, what are you doing? Keaton's the mask that you wear in Ocarina of Time, which is a triple S game for me. It's not perfect, for sure. Ocarina of Time, there are a lot of people that like it more than Link to the Past, and it's okay, I understand. Opinions, right? But I think that it is absolutely a great Zelda game. It's one of the best. And although, again, it's not my favorite, it absolutely is great. I love it. Subjectively, I love The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild even more than I love Ocarina of Time. And if one of our parameters was not dungeons, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild would absolutely be in triple S. But it's going to have to stay at the top of S instead. Because I do think the dungeons in Breath of the Wild are lacking. I think they're bad in a lot of ways. I think they're a cool idea. It's a different take on them. Having the shrines as like small puzzles, I think that's really cool, right? But at the same time, I wish it had regular dungeons. I think if it had regular dungeons, it would be my favorite Zelda game, hands down. Because I absolutely adore Breath of the Wild. I've spent so much time in that world. I love playing around in that game. But I gotta have me some dungeons, man. I gotta. You know what does have dungeons, though? The Oracle games. And Oracle of Seasons is really solid. I like it a lot. It's not my favorite of the two Oracle games. Spoilers. But I do think it's really cool. I think that changing between the seasons and trying to save Den is really cool. I think General Onyx is a really fun fight. And there's some really cool fights throughout. I think it's got some great dungeons as well. Not as good as Ages, though, that I'm going to put in triple S tier. I know this is going to be controversial opinion. That's okay. Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages. Ralph and his story with Queen Abby and everything going on there. The fight with Varen. That fight with Varen is actually really good. There's a lot of great dungeon fights along the way. A lot of great dungeons. I love the World of Ages so much. I don't even know how many times I've beaten. For a long time, it was my second favorite Zelda. Even above Ocarina of Time. And then I've replayed Ocarina of Time since. And got a better appreciation for it. Great game. Absolutely amazing. I'm a big fan of Twilight Princess, too. I think it's really good. I think that it gets bogged down, unfortunately, by that really long opening hour. But past that, it's a really, really solid Zelda game. I like the dungeons well enough. I think the spinner is a cool, weird weapon, right? Even though it's not something that I think should come back, per se, I do think it was fun in this game. And that fight on the Bridge of Eldin is still top-tier moments in Zelda for me. Legend of Zelda Link to the Past, easily one of the best games ever made. I will stake my flag in that and say, not a controversial opinion, right? But Link to the Past was a very important game for me growing up. It was a game that I played with my dad. And even having, grown up, and my dad does not play Zelda anymore, really, I still go back and play Link to the Past. I still love that game. I know it very well, which makes randomized runs using emulators a lot of fun, because it's a different experience, but I absolutely love Legend of Zelda: The Past. Best games ever made. If you have not played it yet and you like Zelda, please go play it. You will adore it. I have not played Triforce Heroes. I'm gonna put it in D, but I have not played it, so I'm sorry. I have no excuse for that. I just have not. Spirit Tracks is pretty good. I liked it well enough. I thought the stuff with Zelda and having to get her to help you, and she was a ghost and couldn't inhabit the armor. I thought that was all really cool. The actual story of the game didn't really work for me, but at the same time, hey, dungeons were fine. Music was good. Zelda 2? Zelda 2 is a weird one because I like Zelda 2. I'm one of those weird people that like Zelda 2, right? But I also recognize it has a ton of problems. So we're going to leave it at A tier. I do still really like it, though, and I think it has some great music. Skyward Sword, I'm also going to put in A. I had a lot of problems with Skyward Sword. I think the story of Skyward Sword is great. The music of Skyward Sword is amazing. However, I really don't like the way that game controls. I had a lot of problems with the motion controls. Specifically, the fights with Girahim were very difficult for me, and I don't know. Everybody else seemed to say it was fine, but I don't like the way it controls. And even past that, having to fight some bosses multiple times got old pretty quickly. I do still really like the game, though. That's why it's in an A. But, hey. Maybe we'll get a remastered version sometime that has regular controller support. Link's Awakening is also triple S for me. I think that game, even had I not played the remake, I think that game is absolutely one of my favorite Zeldas. It has some of my favorite dungeons. I love the final fight that you get to at the top of the mountain. I'm not going to say too much more than that because I know the remake has just come out. I think it has an amazing soundtrack. Ballad of the Windfish has been in my top 5 Zelda soundtrack songs forever. I love that song. And the remake only makes me love it more. They did a great job with it. In fact, because the remake, because we're lumping them in together, I'm actually going to put it above of Ages, which is crazy to me. Link Between Worlds is also really good. It's more Link to the Past with some new tools. And I like it a lot. It's exactly what I wanted it to be. And then Phantom Hourglass, solid, really good. I like it. Again, I really hate the idea of going back to the same dungeon over and over again and just getting further in. But other than that, I thought it was a really solid game and had some really cool puzzles. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. I know we kind of moved through this a lot faster than we have a lot of the other rankings. But my thoughts on Zelda were already pretty cemented, Let's tier them inside the tiers. I think this tier is basically perfect. From here, I would probably move Wind Waker up. Probably put it above Breath of the Wild. And then Majora's Mask, I would probably put about right here. But then after that, I think they're pretty much... I'd probably do this. I think after that, they're pretty much good. I think we could easily do this. No reason not to. And then I would probably do this. Yeah, honestly, I thought this would take me a lot longer. I guess I had a better understanding of what Zelda games I love and which ones I don't than I thought. And there's really not that many Zelda games to go through, so... Let me know what else you'd like to see when it comes to Zelda games or other tier lists. And until next time, I've been Trey. This has been the Full Spectrum. Remember to always enjoy the full spectrum. Zelda has to offer.